Okay, should I go ahead and start or what?
Yes, you can start.
Yes, Chef, you can start now. We are all listening to you. You can see us?
We can see your screen right now.
Okay, should I go ahead and begin?
Yes, please, Chef.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, I apologize for the computer crash, but we're going to talk today about the launch of the Spanish version of First Principles of Scrum. The book was inspired by AI. I'm going to be talking about Scrum and AI, and it helps provide a framework for integrating AI with Agile and Scrum at scale. And it's based on my training in medical physics. I'm fortunate to have an investment fund supporting this. And it also includes information from my healthcare company on a Scrum framework for health and performance. And when JJ and I were working on the second edition of Scrum, the art of doing twice the work in half the time, the book provided a foundation for much of the new material in that book. The first thing I want to talk about is simulation. The way the universe works is simple rules generate complex behavior. And the roots of Scrum come from the simulation of artificial life. So since Scrum evolved out of simulations of biology and artificial life, in the book I go back to physics, and we're very fortunate that Wolfram, who invented Mathematica, the leading simulation product for physicists and mathematicians, has a project to simulate the universe on the computer, and has shown that each physical system has a computational equivalent. And the book talks about how that provides a technology stack to create Scrum. The laws of physics that we know are not the fundamental first principles. They are emergent properties for us as observers who only see things at a high level. They're really averages of what is going on. And what Wolfram has shown is through simulations, the theory of relativity, quantum mechanics, Newton's laws emerge. And because things are unpredictable, the whole universe is expecting and adapting, then evolution is all about inspecting and adapting. The brain is an inspecting and adapting simulation mechanism. And through computer simulations of all of that emerged complex adaptive systems theory, which is what Scrum is based on. So to answer any deeper question about Scrum, we have to go back to complex adaptive systems. So Scrum emerged out of complex adaptive systems, and Scrum at scale emerged out of Scrum, and particularly patterns in the patterns book. And at the top of the technology stack, Agile emerges with values that drive the agile process. And what we're seeing now is AI is becoming a major factor in everything we do. So I want to be talking about that today. One of the fundamental principles that Wolfram showed through simulating the universe is that in order to predict anything, even something as simple as a project, it requires infinite computing power. So you can see that even in the room that you're in, it has a temperature. That temperature is because of trillions of molecules bouncing off one another. And if we were to raise the thermostat and generate more heat in the room, it would require infinite computing power to calculate the movement of all those molecules to determine when the temperature is going to reach the thermostat level. So through simulation of the universe, we see that the fundamental idea is that everything is agile. Furthermore, as we dig into what is going on, there are three fundamental things that create Scrum and affect Scrum that are based on physics. The first one is entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, which says that everything decays. And in Scrum, we observe that as impediments arising, and we try to remove those impediments to prevent that decay. But one of the things that Wolfram has shown us is that in this sea of chaos, which is entropy, all systems degrading and ultimately failing, there are special places where self-organization spontaneously occurs. So the whole goal of Scrum is to try to move the system, whether it be the team or the product itself, into a space where physically spontaneously occurring self-organization is making it easy to get things done, easy to build a great product. And the way to find those places where it's easy to build great teams and great products, patterns can show us the way. Patterns are like the breadcrumbs in the forest that lead us to the special place where things really work. And so one of the fundamental findings of the research is that self-organization is not something you do. It is a place that you find. And so constantly removing impediments on the team is changing the structure of the team and the environment until it hits the sweet spot of execution. So at the root of everything is physics. And we can see that in Newton's laws. Of us are trying to get teams and organizations to be more agile, to be more productive, to build better products faster. And to do that, we have to move an organization. We have to move a team. That requires force. Force equals mass times acceleration. So if the organization is big, it requires more force. Work is force applied over a distance. And power is work divided by time. That means to do twice the work in half the time, you have to have 4 times the power. How do we get that power? Well, the first principle of the Agile Manifesto is individuals and interactions, processes and tools, because individuals provide the power and the interactions cause the application of that power to exert the force. And we can actually measure today with wearable technology the power of an individual. So this watch shows metrics from firstbeat.com analytics. They train Olympic teams. And they have found there's two most important metrics are, number one, they call it body battery, the energy that you have as an individual. And you can see that watch is up almost 100%. And the other important factor is stress. If there's any stress, it's going to reduce your energy and cripple performance. So what you want to do is get stress really, really low, energy really, really high. And then when you execute, it looks easy. So through a framework I've developed for performance for the individual, you can actually use the watch to quadruple your power. When you get that watch in the state that that watch is in now, you enter into a state of flow where time kind of vanishes. Things are just easy to get done. You can get totally focused. And if you have a whole team of people with watches like that, they're amazing. So the power to get things done is what's enabled us to survive as individuals, as teams, as organizations, as towns, states, countries. And the whole survival of an evolution is inspecting and adapting. The brain is a simulation mechanism. You're constantly thinking, projecting, okay, what am I going to have for lunch? Or what did I eat for lunch? Or when will I be home? Are my children okay? You're simulating these things all the time in your mind. Will I finish the sprint with everything done? You make a plan to do that. Now, if you get to the end of the sprint and you're not done, that creates a gap between reality and your simulation. And now you need to redo the simulation. And if you failed to meet the objectives of the simulation, then you have a lot of explaining to do in Scrum, to management, to customers. The team may be stressed out. They may be depressed. They have this gap that Friston's model of the brain says is measurable mathematically. And he calls it Bayesian surprise. And the whole goal of human evolution and Scrum, and now in robots, is to minimize Bayesian surprise. Because if you finish the sprint early, then you have all this extra energy to focus on innovation and continuous improvement instead of paying that cost of the Bayesian surprise. So everything in Scrum is based on neuroscience. And if you understand the neuroscience of Scrum, you could be a much better Scrum Master, a much better Agile coach. You know how people work, how teams work. Now, out of the simulation of physics, chemistry, biology, life, the fundamental mathematical theorem that actually created the inspiration for Scrum was developed by Christopher Langdon at Los Alamos Labs. He mathematically proved that systems operating with maximum degrees of freedom evolve quicker. And when I read that, I was running a really big banking projects where hundreds of developers that were years and tens of millions of dollars over budget. And I realized when I read that theorem that the reason that they were late was because there were too many constraints. They needed more freedom. We need to unleash the teams. And that was the inspiration for Scrum. Scrum comes out of complex adaptive systems theory. So the whole idea of empowerment is to unleash the team and enable them to self-manage so they can be autonomous, independent people and teams collaborating towards a common goal. They can only do that if they have a leader who serves, because any micromanagement is going to superimpose control and make it impossible for the system to evolve quickly. And to be successful long term, you have to run at a sustainable pace. Now, I asked one of the original extreme programming guys, what was the sustainable pace of the first XP team? And he said the sustainable pace was 42 times as fast as the waterfall teams in the same company. So sustainable pace is really fast if you have individuals with the power and the ability to collaborate to generate those interactions that make things work fast. The most important pattern that's emerged out of all this work and is in the patterns books, the Scrum book, The Spirit of the Game, is called Teams That Finish Early Accelerate Faster. It's based on a study of thousands of sprints by a venture capital group. And what they discovered, the only difference between the average team and a great team was the great teams finished the sprints early. And we now know why, and that's because if you finish early, you minimize Bayesian surprise. And because of Friston's free energy model of the brain, it allows you to channel a huge amount of energy towards innovation and improvement. When you go up to the next level, you find that the Agile values emerge at the Agile Manifesto meeting. The only widely deployed processes were Scrum and extreme programming. And in both of them, we were unleashing the personal power of the individuals and creating an environment where the interactions built great teams. And early and regular and faster delivery of working systems was the second Agile value. And getting the customer to collaborate with the team to participate in this complex adaptive system that's evolving quickly was the third most important value. And the fourth value, responding to change, was based on Wolfram's fundamental principle of computational irreducibility. you can't predict what is going to happen, so you must inspect and adapt. So there's a lot of ideas in the Agile world, but the only ones that work are the ones that are grounded in first principles. Because these principles are like the law of gravity. You cannot avoid them. And so Agile values that align with first principles build successful Agile teams, and those that don't align don't work. So as we worked on the book, building this technology stack, all the way from fundamental physics, AI began to emerge as more and more important, and particularly the integration of Scrum with AI. Because Scrum is a framework for innovation and productivity. And we know that at Microsoft, programmers are 5 times as effective with Microsoft Copilot. And because of that, last year, Microsoft laid off 12% of its workforce. And it rehired about 80% of those people, but only people with AI expertise. Now, industry analysts are projecting that by 2030, teams will be 30 to 100 times faster than they are today. Twice the work in half the time is only 4 times faster. So we need to give Scrum teams at least a 5x acceleration. And we'll do that by integrating Scrum with AI. And that model will evolve similar to what's happened in the games of chess and Go. Some years ago, the world champion chess master became a computer. And then one of the former world champion human chess masters said, I'm going to create a contest where anybody can do anything with or without AI and see who wins. And then 2 humans with AI and a laptop became the world chess champion. The same thing happened later with Go, the game of Go. So it's a human AI collaboration that wins the game. And so as we worked with AI to actually build and write and expand this book, it became clear that Scrum at scale with team members using AI tools and also AI being a full-fledged member of the team, that will be the surviving model for Scrum teams by 2030. So the question is, how are we going to get there? Well, I started in AI back in 1970 at the Stanford AI Lab. As a graduate student, I was building a gaming system where I had the computers playing against one another, just like they do today. And the head of the laboratory was a guy named McCarthy, the inventor of Lisp, one of the 2 godfathers of AI, with Marvin Minsky, who I did some work with later. And every morning, Professor McCarthy would walk by I just had a computer in a corner. I was just a graduate student. He'd walk by and he'd say, Sutherland, you're using 10% of the total compute power of the lab. Stop doing that. You're just a graduate student. And then he would walk away. But he never turned off my computer. So every day it was the same thing. And after that experience, over many years, I worked in many AI companies. The one that actually inspired Scrum was a company called Object Databases in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I was the president of the company, and we were building AI databases in Lisp, and we were putting them into banking environments in C++. And a team of AI people from the graduate students from the MIT AI lab walked down the street to my office, and they said, "Running a company. It's going to be called iRobot, and we need some space. Can we work in your development area?" And I said, "Sure, you're our people, right? We can learn from you, you can learn from us." And so for several years, they were building autonomous robots in my lab. And about every other day, they would escape from the office, run into my office, trying to hunt me down. They had infrared heat-seeking sensors. They were amazing. When you turn them on, they had no data. They had no database. They had no central computer. All they had was a chip in a leg that can move a leg, a chip in the spine that could coordinate legs, and a chip in the head with a neural network, and lots of sensors. So the only data was streaming data from the real world. And you'd turn that robot on, and it looked like an octopus. Its legs would start flailing, and it would roll over, and it would get upright. And then for the next minute or two, it looked like a baby learning how to walk. But within about 3 minutes, it was running around the room. It would even run to the stairs, and you'd think it was going to fall down the stairs, but it would stop, and it wouldn't fall down the stairs. How did it learn that in 3 minutes? The senior professor from MIT, Rodney Brooks, would come to our happy hour on Friday afternoons. And I asked him, I said, "Professor Brooks, that robot is amazing. What if we had simple rules that we could give to the software teams that I had back at the bank that were really slow, it was late? Maybe we could boot them up into super fast teams in a week using the technology we're using in the robots." I said, "Do you think that would work?" And he said to me, "I don't know, but I think you ought to try it." And so I did. It's called Scrum. So Scrum emerged out of AI, and it's ideally suited for incorporating AI into the team. Remember, one of Wolfram's first principles is computational equivalent. Everything, every complex adaptive system like a Scrum team can be represented as a computational model. And that model can help us refine what we're doing, and we can assign parts of those activities to humans and other parts of those activities to AI. And the subsumption architecture used to build the autonomous robots had a layered control system where you push functionality down as far as possible. Behavior-based control, it's inspecting and adapting based on real-time data. Modularity, the system is modular, components interacting. And reactive planning, instead of making a big plan that we know is not predictable, We do a little plan and see what happens. Then we update, we do another little plan. We're constantly reacting and adjusting and inspecting and adapting. This is the way the subsumption architecture works in robotics, and it's the way Scrum always worked. So given all that, what has emerged out of the book? Well, as I'm working on this book, I'm starting to write chapters on how AI experts are debating who is going to be the first person to generate $1 billion company with only one human employee. And so I'm thinking, could I start up a Scrum team of AIs and do something useful? And I happen to be a year behind on my expense reports. And I decided the only way I'm going to dig myself out of this hole is to have a team of AIs create an application that does all my expense reports for me. So I formed a team of 6 AIs. I'm the product owner. The Scrum Master is a persona in a GPT called Scrum Sage, which you can access. My senior consultant is Claude 3.5. He's the only AI that has a broad enough view. This expenses system has dozens of components. And so I find that the programmers, I have Alex, a GPT that's a programmer. There's a GPT on the OpenAI site called Python, which I use. But they only are good at working at small pieces of things. They get confused if you give them a complex system. And I have 2 AIs that are tool wizards, GitHub, Copilot, and JetBrains AI. So when I get a bunch of errors, I can ask them, okay, for this piece of code, what's going on? What would you advise Claude to do to fix? Claude's doing most of the coding, but he's always pairing with one of the other GPTs. In 5 one-week sprints, we had an application that did all my expense reports for 4 different companies for an entire quarter in 1 second. And JJ, who's there with you, is saying, you're not going to send all those expense reports to Scrum Inc. right away, are you? Because right now I'm a year behind, but next week I be current if I really turn the AIs loose. So this is going to be a product. Actually, I'm going to put it up on my website, and I'm looking for beta users to test out this new expense system. So I started from the beginning, down at the bottom of the slide. I've talked about physics, computational irreducibility. Nothing is predictable. You always have to inspect, adapt. Computational equivalence. Everything can be modeled in a computer through a simulation. The most important things are through the computer simulation of the universe that emerge are entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, self-organization, which occurs spontaneously in certain regions of space and time, and patterns which allow us to figure out where we can be most successful. All of that is physics. Now we start modeling evolution, and we find through simulations of artificial life that systems operate best at at the edge of chaos. And that leads to complex adaptive systems theory, which is the fundamental root of Scrum. So Scrum emerged to have a simple framework to deal with the complexity of complex adaptive systems. And then Scrum at Scale emerged to deal with the complexity of an organization, a whole organization. Like, for example, Amazon and Microsoft, they have thousands of Scrum teams that all have to work together to update all their software every day. And in Microsoft's case, the update occurs about 12 times a second to production. And the Agile values emerge as the guidelines at the highest level and trace back all the way to the bottom of the stack. So responding to change traces all the way down the stack to physics, computational irreducibility. And so if you understand these principles, you could be a much more effective Scrum Master, a much more effective Agile coach, and a much more effective Agile leader. So that's my message today. And I'm happy to maybe answer a few questions if there are questions that the audience wants to ask. We can talk a little bit more about this.
¿Alguna pregunta? Pueden hacer la pregunta en español y nuestra traductora que está allá y nos va a ayudar se la haría a Jeff. ¿Alguna duda?
Hi, Jeff. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very faintly.
Thank you. The first part of your presentation was kind of a framework change for me because you talked about get stress really low to get productivity and returns high. Why is that a framework change for me? Because I learned that stress goes like in a normal curve with incremental returns up to a certain point. But stress was correlated to productivity. Here you're saying completely the opposite. As low as we can to get the higher speed and returns. Do you see a cultural thing that may be my framework, or is it a fundamental change where you go to get stress as low as possible because no stress is the best secret sauce, as you called it in one point of your presentation?
Yes, this is exactly right. Okay, think of a high jumper or a golfer, okay? When you're coming up to that jump, you need to have tremendous energy to blast off. But the way you do it, you have to minimize any stress on your joints. So a really good high jumper, it looks effortless because it's almost with no strain. So stress as measured on the watch is measuring the problem with your body actually executing, okay? And you want that as absolutely as low as possible so that the energy that you have can be captured. And we saw that in the recent Olympic France, particularly in gymnastics. Some of those people on the floor, when they would do a flip, it looks like they just bounce off the floor into 15 feet in the air. The unbelievable energy. And if there's any stress in their body or weakness in their joints, they couldn't do that, okay? So it has to look almost effortless, and it only does that when your stress is absolutely at a minimum.
Bueno, entonces con eso vamos a cerrar la presentación del doctor Jeff Sutherland. Por favor, quiero pedirles un fuerte aplauso. Thank you very much, Jeff, for being with us today.